So what's up, family? It's your boy, once again, kid from Brooklyn. Genki desu ka? Another one of my episodes of Japan Be Like. Yo, Japan Be Like. This is where I talk about my personal experience in Japan, having lived there for 10 years. Of course, through my perspective, this is what I think about Japan. Everything is subjective. So this is my subjective experience in Japan. So in the first couple episodes, the first episode I talked about what kind of people would make a good fit and what kind of people would make a bad fit in Japan. And then in the second episode, I talked about food and transportation, had some technical issues and had to cut off early. But I think I said everything I wanted to say about those topics. If you hear me sniffling and whatnot, it's because of allergy season here in Atlanta, which is crazy. But it was worse, actually, in Japan for me. So, it is what it is, right? That's what they say. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about housing in Japan. Now, here in Atlanta, I live in a one-bedroom apartment. It's pretty nice size. It's not huge. It's not tiny either. It's pretty nice size. It's got a little back porch, nice outside storage area, and I'm paying just about $1,000 a month for my one-bedroom apartment here on the outskirts, actually, of Atlanta. Do I think $1,000 is too much? Maybe. This is what it is, though, in these days and times. The rent is what it is, and there's not a lot you can do about it, right? I mean, there is a lot, but depending on resources, there isn't much. $1,000. In Japan, the last apartment that I lived in was probably just about, maybe about the same size as this apartment. My apartment here has a living room, a dining room, a back porch, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. When I was in Nagoya, the last apartment I lived in, it was a 2 LDK. 2 LDK, that means it had a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen. And then it also had two kind of what you consider bedrooms. Two rooms you could close and separate off from the living room, dining room, and kitchen. And I was paying, I think when I left, I was paying 7,000 yen, $700 just about a month. I found rent in Nagoya to be extremely affordable. And just like any place else, you can find deals depending on how hard you're willing to look, if you have resources and whatnot. But in Nagoya, which is Japan's third largest city, I was paying $700 a month at the end of my time there, and I was very happy with my apartment. All the apartments I lived in, I paid right around $700 or $800 a month for a one bedroom, which I found to be very reasonable. The issue in Japan is finding a landlord who will rent to you. Now, a lot of people say, they use that as one of their reasons to say that Japan is a racist country because it's so hard to find a place to rent. But if you look at it from their perspective, which is they don't really know anything about you, the landlords, you can kind of present any history that you want to them, and they know that. You can give them all kinds of references and talk about places you lived before. This is basically if you've just moved to Japan, but it's an issue if you live there for a long time too. You can talk about references and places you lived before, but at the end of the day, the landlords don't know you and don't trust you. and very often are unwilling to take the chance to give you the apartment. If they do give you the apartment, they're going to ask you for key money, which is sort of similar to first month's, last month's rent. Some places will also ask for first month, last month rent. Some places will ask you to have somebody co-sign, somebody preferably Japanese, obviously, to co-sign, so that they can get their money if you trash their place or leave early or break the lease or whatever. So it's not as easy as finding a place here in America for those reasons. Landlords are not really willing to trust you, and I'm not going to say rightfully so, or I'm not going to say unrightfully so, but you just think about it. If somebody moved, if you owned a building or if you owned a property and somebody moved to your city from another place, another country, didn't speak the language completely, you knew nothing about their history or their background, it might be a little bit difficult for you to consider giving them your space to live in. And I'm so sorry for the sniffling. I'm going to really try to stop doing that. I know it's annoying. But if you lived in Atlanta right now, you would understand. So Tokyo, though, from what I understand, is incredibly expensive, incredibly competitive, with a lot of the same issues as a smaller city like Nagoya, those being the landlords not really trusting you. However, Tokyo is an international city, and the landlords are aware of the fact that it's an international city. So maybe in Tokyo it's a little bit easier than it might have been in Nagoya, but on the other hand, Tokyo is insanely crowded. Everybody wants to live in Tokyo, so it's tough, definitely tough to find a place in Tokyo, and you're not going to get a big apartment in Tokyo. The apartments in Nagoya were 3 times as big as what you could get in Tokyo for the same money. But even still, the apartments in Nagoya were pretty small. So Tokyo places, I've been to Tokyo obviously a couple times, stayed with a couple friends, and their places were absolutely tiny. I mean, like a room, just a room, maybe with a bathroom, and that's it. Small, and the room is small. I also had the opportunity to stay in capsule hotels, which I loved. I think capsule hotels are kind of a love or hate situation, from what I understand. They're tiny. It's an actual capsule. It's shaped like a long cylindrical tube, and that is your room for the night. This room, this tube, they have different layers of them. You can climb in, get into the bottom one. That's the one on the ground, and there's going to be someone sleeping almost immediately above you, like bunk beds, but I guess it would be bunk capsules. And then maybe someone above you, like a submarine. And that's your room. It's just a little capsule. These are, when I went to, actually I did stay in capsule hotels in both Tokyo and Osaka. When I stayed there, they were $40 a night. That includes a sauna, which was fantastic. And, you'd go to the sauna floor. These capsule hotels also are separated by men and women, separated by gender. So one floor would be all men, the next floor would be all women. And you're not allowed as a man on the woman's floor. At least I don't think you are. I never tried to go, but that reminds me of a story. But save that for another time. On the men's floor, you'll see Japanese men in their pajamas all over the floor, not on the floor itself, but on the level, drinking coffee, eating lunch, reading the newspapers in their pajamas, which is pretty cool. It's an experience, right? It's just a different experience. So houses in Japan. I had a couple friends of mine who owned houses. That is a topic that I really don't know very much about, buying property in Japan. I'm sure that there are some loopholes you've got to jump through to be able to buy and own property in Japan. But I did know a couple of guys that owned houses. They own these really cool, old Japanese style houses in Nagoya. And from what I understand, those are even a better deal than the apartments. Houses in Japan, you can buy old houses on the cheap and, fix it up or live in it however you'd like. But I know a couple of guys who had houses and they were fantastic. I love old houses much more than modern houses anyway, so that fell right in line with what I dig. I'm so sorry about the sniffling. So that's pretty much my take on housing in Japan. The next thing I want to talk about is working in Japan, which everyone in Japan is doing. I think one of the biggest differences about work in Japan and work in America is that many Americans see work, unless they're doing their dream job, as a nuisance and something they have to do, something that they are, being forced to do, and that comes across in service and courtesy and things like that. But in Japan, work is just seen as a part of life. It's just it goes beyond duty. It goes beyond obligation. It just is what you do to be a productive member of society. When I was in Japan, the entire 10 years I was there, I knew very, very, very few people who weren't working. And when I say working, I mean legitimate, not that freelance work is not legitimate, but like a 9 to 5. Everybody that I knew was working for some company or some school, some organization, some university, a set schedule where they had to be at work at a certain time and put in an X amount of hours of work and then leave. Freelancing is not as common in Japan as it is in America. Now, obviously, you can stay in Japan long enough to make the connections you need to eventually, start freelancing, doing whatever it is that you do. But that's not as difficult, not as easy as it sounds, and it's not easy anywhere. It's not easy here. It's not easy anywhere. But I think in Japan, it's even a little bit more difficult. Everybody's working. Work is important, and in Japan, it isn't necessarily that you are your work, but you must work. If you don't have a job, if you're in between jobs, people look at you kind of funny. It's not the norm to not have a job. Punctuality is extremely important in Japan. Punctuality is also extremely important, relatively speaking, in America compared to other countries, Caribbean countries, South American countries. For these countries, being on time means being, at your desk or whatever within 15 minutes. If you're supposed to be there at 9 o'clock, but you're there at 9:05, 9:10, it's cool. Not so in Japan. You've got to be at your workstation at exactly the minute that your shift begins. So if your shift begins at 9, it is not cool to be sliding through the door at 9:05, because what that means to your Japanese coworkers is that you're not going to actually get started working until 9:10, 9:15. And at that point, obviously, you're late. So being on time in Japan means actually being early than the designated time. If you're supposed to be at work at 9, get there at 8:45. it goes beyond just performance, responsibility, professionalism. It goes directly to the heart of your character in Japan. That's how important punctuality is. If you're late, you're kind of a bad person. And nobody wants to F with a bad person in Japan. So if I were to give advice to anyone working in Japan or seeking work in Japan, it would be prepare yourself to be extremely time oriented, much more so than in any other place probably you've ever worked. Be on time. Punctuality is a must in Japan. Another aspect of work in Japan is you should always look as though you are doing something constructive, even if you're not. The fact of the matter is, Japanese companies, for all their world renown and quality control and efficiency, are incredibly inefficient. I can't tell you how many times I saw my coworkers pretending over and over to be doing something when I know that they weren't doing anything. It's just another way of fitting into the harmonious spirit of life in Japan. Everyone is pretending to be working a lot harder than they are. Everyone knows everyone else is pretending to be working a lot harder than they are, but it's cool. That's how they get down. There's no such thing as just chilling at work because you finished, your workload or your tasks or your responsibilities for the day. There's no such thing as just kind of like, well, I'm done, kick my feet up, lamp, just chill, Hey, how you doing? Oh, nothing, I'm done, I did it all, finished. Eh? Nani mo na yo? Wata? No way. You can't do that in Japan. There's, the Japanese ethos is kind of, there's always something to be done. And if there isn't something to be done, fake it, make it up. Shuffle your papers, write your girlfriend a letter, do something on the computer, make copies of something on the copy machine. Always look like you are working, whether or not you are. This is extremely, extremely important at the workplace in Japan. Now, for the majority of the time that I was in Japan, I was an English teacher, and I worked in pretty much every environment in Japan that I could, except the university. I could not. Japanese universities, by and large, require their English teachers to have a master's degree, which I do not have. Got a bachelor's, but I don't have a master's. And so I could not get on with the university jobs, which I kept hearing over and over again were the best gigs to get in Japan. But that said, I spent an equal time, I'd say, in Japan working in private situations, elementary schools, junior high schools, and businesses. I would say pretty much equal across the board. Private institutions, I guess I mean Eikaiwa. I worked for Berlitz. I worked for literally maybe a dozen, maybe not that many, half a dozen private school, private situations in Japan. Teaching mostly little kids some adults. Actually, Berlitz was mostly adults. And I didn't really enjoy working for Berlitz. Nothing against Berlitz. It just wasn't quite my system. They have an extremely book-based system that you're not really allowed to deviate very much from, and that's not quite my style. I didn't work for Nova. I didn't work for Eon. I didn't work for, a lot of the other bigger ones, but I did work for a few in Nagoya. I also worked in the junior high school and elementary schools and high schools and teaching business to businessmen for corporations. And of the group, my favorite would have to be the junior high schools. Why? Junior high school students in Japan are right at that age where they're not quite little kids anymore. So they don't have that crazy, out of control energy of little kids, but they're also not high schoolers. And once you've reached high school in Japan, you've become jaded. What do I mean by that? I mean, as a child's natural curiosity makes him want to learn. He has not learned that it's not cool to want to learn certain things. He has not been indoctrinated. The little kid has not been indoctrinated quite as yet with the idea that English is impossible. I can't do it. And this is the attitude of Japanese adults, and they learn this attitude by high school. So by high school, Japanese students, Japanese kids in Japanese high schools, even if they want to learn, they've learned that their society has taught them that they'll never be able to learn English. It's too difficult. So they don't want to learn. And like I said, even if they want to learn, they've also learned that in Japan, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. So if they are one or two of a 30 student class that really is eager to learn the language, they'll look around the classroom and see the other students aren't really eager to learn. And even if they are, they won't express it. They won't show that they're eager to learn because their friends and classmates aren't. And if they are, they look like a weirdo. So teaching high school in Japan was like teaching a morgue. One or two students maybe participate, but the vast majority of the other students are just sitting there looking at you like you're from another planet, which you are. And it's tough. It's tough. It's hard. It's not psychologically, but how can I say? It wreaks havoc with your psyche because you're doing your best to teach. These kids are bored to tears looking at you like, you've got another head growing out of your head, and it's no fun. Junior high schoolers, like I said, they're not kids, so they don't have that nutty energy. They're not jaded yet. They're perfect. Their brains are still open. They're curious. They're fun, friendly. They haven't settled into who the cool kids are and who the nerdy kids are. They don't quite know each other or themselves 100% yet, and they're curious about this foreigner, this language. They're open, and I absolutely loved teaching junior high school. Elementary school is kind of the opposite of high school. I'd go as far as to say Japanese elementary school kids are just as wild and crazy as American elementary school kids, maybe wilder, maybe crazier. A lot of fun, but a lot of energy, a lot of responsibility. You are their toy. They're going to be climbing all over you. touching your hair, smelling you, wanting to eat your lunch, pulling on your clothes, putting their finger. No, they don't. They're not putting their fingers in your butt yet. That's the high schoolers. Japanese elementary school kids, great kids, but just not quite for me. Again, I like the classroom to be a little bit more controlled, a little bit more mature, but not so controlled and mature that they're bored to death. The elementary school kids, like I said, a little bit too much energy, just a little bit too nutty for me. In the elementary schools, and the junior high schools and the high schools, you're going to be asked to teach anywhere from 3 to 6 classes per day. That's 3 to 6 hours per day. Of that 3 to 6 hours, you're not going to be usually teaching by yourself. So you will not, for example, if you have a junior high school class for 1 hour from 11 to 12 or 10 to 11 or what have you, you're not going to be teaching that full hour by yourself. The Japanese teacher is going to be there in the classroom assisting you, whether or not he or she can speak Japanese. He or she is going to be assisting you. It's not just going to be you, but you will definitely need to prepare lessons, which you'll have to show to both the English teacher and maybe the lead teacher, if there's a lead teacher, maybe the principal, if there's a principal. You might have to present your lessons. I didn't have to do that too often, but sometimes I did. Depends on the school, depends on how involved the principal wants to be in your teaching. 3 to 6 hours per day. A light day, 3 classes. Some days, 2 classes, rarely. But some days, 2 classes. Usually 3, 4, 5 classes. You're out of there by 3 o'clock. Generally speaking. You have to arrive by 8 o'clock, generally speaking. There's generally like a meeting in the office, shokuinshitsu, if I'm correct. There's a meeting in the shokuinshitsu, where the principal sort of addresses all the teachers and the teachers sort of address whatever problems they have or whatever upcoming events, issues, and things like that. And you're expected to be a part of that, but not necessarily take part in that. When I joined any new school, there was a big ceremony, not necessarily for me, but maybe it was. I don't exactly remember, but I don't think so. But I can remember whenever I would join a new school, there's always a big ceremony. That might have just been at the beginning of the semester or something. I don't know. But there's a big ceremony where they introduce you to the student body and you have to get on stage and you say a speech, introduce yourself. And, it's really nerve-wracking. And then sometimes when you're leaving, there's another ceremony where you say goodbye. Maybe it's the end of the semester. And that was a lot more emotional than you expect. You've made connections with those kids and the teachers. They've made connections with you. It's just a human connection. The fact that you're not the same nationality is gone. You're just humans. They're humans, and you've made connections. And when it's time to go, it's hard. It's hard. So I talked about the hours. I talked about the teaching, preparing lessons. The pay is not great. The pay is much better at the university level, or if you're able to get into a school having been recruited by the school itself. Generally speaking, these recruiting agencies recruit a bunch of students, a bunch of teachers, and then they fan the teachers out to a bunch of different schools with whom they've got contracts. And then they pay you a percentage of what the school is paying them. So, for example, I heard in some cases that schools or the Board of Education were paying these recruitment services, Yonju Manyen, Yonju Go Manyen, 4,000, 4,500 a month per teacher. And then from that, they were giving us Niju, Niju Goman, Niju Roku, Niju Nana, Niju Hachi, Sanju Manyen, if you were really lucky, but generally speaking, anywhere between 25, maybe on the low side, 2,200 to maybe on the high side, 2,800 a month, which is more than enough to pay all your bills and save some money in Japan. But it does not fluctuate. It's not like it's not like if you worked for one of these recruitment agencies for 10 years, after that 10 years, you're making, gojuman yen a month. No, your salary is going to cap, it's going to hit a ceiling, and it's going to stay there. But, the money isn't the thing a lot of times. It's just the experience, the people, and of course you need money to live your life. But being an ESL teacher, an English teacher in Japan, is not an occupation I would recommend to someone if that someone was heavy on money. Teaching English in Japan is not about money. If the only thing you're doing is working in a junior high school or a high school or an eikaiwa, even if you're working in a university, it's not that much more. But the good thing about work and teaching in Japan is that if you have a full-time job teaching junior high school, elementary school, eikaiwa, and you're pulling in 25 a month, 2,000, 2,500 a month, you can easily pick up private students, create your own class, which I did, both of which, or create. You can create from your sense of self, from your culture. For example, I'm an actor. I created, I don't know if I should call it a project or a school or even a class. I created something in Nagoya called Hollywood Acting Club. No, that wasn't it. It was Hollywood English Club. I'm sorry. Hollywood English Club. And what I did, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I did because I don't want you to steal my idea. But as an actor, I took some of what we do in acting class and I brought it I created this club. And what I essentially did was I combined some of what we are taught in acting classes and so on and so forth with people's love for movies. And I just put the two together. And it was a hit. There's lots and lots of opportunities in Japan if you are ingenious and can bring some of your culture, format it in such a way that it's educational and entertaining, and present it, you can double your salary. I used to get paid $100 an hour to teach these two little kids out in Gifu. They were the kids of this dentist. I don't remember how they heard of me, but somehow they heard of me, got my phone number, called me, and they were paying me $100 an hour. And I was at their house 5 hours a week. And that was along with 3 or 4 or 5 other private students, that I had, along with my Hollywood English Club, along with my DJing, along with my magazines. So for a while, I had an incredible salary in Japan. But if I hadn't, dug into myself to figure out specifically what I could bring to the table, I would have just had the average English teacher, 250,000 yen a month salary, which, like I said, it's 2,500 bucks a month. You do the math. So yeah, I guess that's what I want to say about work. And obviously, there's other work you can do. Now, being an English teacher is in Japan is kind of low man on the totem pole. It's like an entry level job to get into Japan. Now, there's nothing wrong with being an English teacher for 20 years. It's a noble profession. It's not easy. It really requires you to make as much effort as you can. It's not easy. Not everybody can be an English teacher. But if you want to move into other areas of work in Japan, for example, if you want to become a businessman, if you want to, I had a couple of friends moved to Tokyo. They became recruiters for major corporations, for international corporations in Japan. I had a couple of guys who were in real estate, knew a couple of guys who were in real estate, knew a couple of guys who owned restaurants, knew a couple of guys who owned clothing stores, clubs. These kinds of jobs require you to learn the language. It's simple, right? It's simple. I mean, if you knew somebody moving to America from some country, Peru, Bolivia, I don't know, France, Brazil, one of the first pieces of advice you would give them would be learn to speak English. It's the same in Japan. If you want to go higher up the social ladder and do better financially and be more a part of the culture, learn the language. It's simple. It's not rocket science. It's simple. English teaching jobs, not that difficult to come by, but at the same time, not that easy to come by. You got to put your work in to get a good English teaching job. And, almost all the English teachers that I know in Japan were constantly in and out of work because most of these English teaching jobs are contracted. They're contractual. They sign you to a contract. You work for a year. If they like your performance, you want to stay on, sign you to another contract. Maybe offer you a 3-year contract. I got offered a 3-year contract after my first year there. And then after that, I only wanted 1-year contracts because I didn't know how long I was going to stay. And I didn't want to make a 3-year commitment, not knowing if I was going to stay there, even though I wound up staying 10 years. So most English teaching jobs are contractual in Japan. What else? Is that it? Is that it for we did housing, we did work. I think the other thing I was going to talk about was lifestyle. What do I mean by lifestyle? I guess what I mean is the relationship between work, leisure time, family. I guess that's what I mean. And I've already touched on the idea that work is number one. It's your number one responsibility in Japan. I think in America, your number one responsibility seems to be expressing yourself and, expressing the best you and so on and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. But in Japan, there's no question the number one responsibility for most people is work, just going to work. So that's going to take up 75% of your life in Japan, your job, your going to and from your job, being at your job, preparing for your job, getting a job, thinking about your job. 75-80% of your life. Another 10% of your life, I think, is going to be just acclimating to Japan, just being in Japan, both physically and mentally. as opposed to just physically, but keeping your mind, wherever you came from, which a lot of people do, which I think is, I don't want to say it's a no-no, but it just impacts your chances of success, like across the board. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. I learned that lesson the hard way, actually, in Japan. It wasn't until maybe my 6th year in Japan that I kind of made a conscious decision that, okay, dude, you're not in New York anymore. You're not in LA. You're not in America, bro. This is a whole different place. You got to kind of chill out on what you think is the best way to act, and kind of like, take on some of the attributes of the people here, so you can make your progression through the society smoother or whatever, So like I said, 75% work, 10% just kind of acclimating to Japan, 5% just kind of acclimating to Japan. And then the other 10 or 5% is I guess your leisure time, whatever you do. Japanese people love to drink. Drinking is a big deal in Japan. When I was in Japan, I don't drink. So when I was in Japan, what I did a lot was I spent a lot of my time in the parks in Nagoya. I love parks, period. I love parks. So I spent a lot of my time in the parks. I spent a lot of my free time riding my bike. I went to clubs. I like clubs. I like dancing, music, what have you. I went to clubs a lot in Japan during the summer and spring. There's hanami and what have you. During the summertime, there were a lot of park events, barbecues, things like that I spent a lot of time at. So, again, 75% of your life revolve around your work. Another 10, 15% revolve around just you, being in Japan, getting your head and your mind and your body in Japan. Another 10 to 5%, whatever it is that you like doing, So, yeah, lifestyle. I guess I covered lifestyle. And then this will be the last one I'm going to cover for this particular episode. And I'm going to talk about friendships in Japan. And when I'm talking about friendships, well, I'll specify. So first, I want to talk about friendships as a man that you can make with other Japanese men, which is almost impossible. I don't know why it is. I don't know what it is. But for my 10 years in Japan, I did not make one good, close Japanese friend that I'm still in contact with today. I never had a Japanese man invite me to his place to, whatever they do, drink, smoke, whatever. It is tough for whatever reason for foreign dudes and Japanese dudes to make friends. I think Japanese dudes don't know what they have to gain from being your friend. I think they think it's a nuisance. They can't speak Japanese. They can't speak English. They assume you can't speak Japanese. You got nothing in common. It is tough to make friends with Japanese guys in Japan. It is not as tough to make friends with other foreign dudes in Japan. But that comes with a caveat. So I categorized the different kinds of foreign dudes that I came into contact with in Japan. And I got quite a few categories, going to try to wrap it up real quick. But these are the different guys, the different kinds of guys that you as a foreigner are going to run into in Japan, in my opinion, in no particular order. Okay, so the first kind of guy is what I think I was in Japan. And this guy is the adventurer. Okay, he likes adventures. He likes to go different places, check it out. He's open to different experiences, as open as he can be at first anyway, to different people and different ways of doing things. He's excited for the adventure aspect of it, wants to learn, wants to soak up as much of the culture as he can. He's amped to be someplace different, and he's excited. This kind of guy is cool. Obviously, I'm saying I'm that kind of guy, but that's what I think. This kind of guy is cool. No problems. May or may not have something to hide from where he's coming from. But it doesn't matter. He doesn't let that thing that he's running from dictate his life in Japan. He's just there to learn, see, take in, try to give back, have a decent time, kind of explore and get involved. The second kind of guy I think that you might run into in Japan is the conqueror. The conqueror kind of guy. This guy has come from his country to Japan to kind of take over. This guy is, cocky, maybe, arrogant, loud. This guy is the baddest thing going, the conqueror kind of guy. And usually what he's there to conquer is the women. He's tends to be an alpha male type of dude. Nothing against alpha males. I don't think of myself as an alpha male. I don't think of myself as a beta male either. I think of myself as a sigma male. Do some research if you want to, but nothing against the alpha male dudes, but the conqueror kind of guys, these are those kinds of guys. I'm not into the conqueror type of dude. I'm not into the conqueror type of dude either here or in Japan, but you're going to run into those guys. The third type of guy that I think you'll run into in Japan has like a couple of slashes. No, I'm not going to get to him yet. The third type of guy is the nerd, the nerdy guy. The guy who was a nerd in your country and he's a nerd in Japan. Kind of introverted, kind of awkward, shy, but at the same time, mellow, laid back, generally speaking, pretty easy to get along with. These kinds of guys, I really dig. Unassuming dudes, they're not putting on any airs. They dig the country, they're doing their best to, be cool and do their thing. But they're nerds. And I don't even like using the word but. And they're nerds. It's not a negative thing. It just is what it is. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be the nerds in Japan. The heavy, super heavy into anime, maybe. Super heavy into manga, maybe. Super heavy into sumo. Super heavy into Japanese history. These are the nerds, as far as I'm concerned. The fourth kind of guy is the slash guy. These guys are the weirdos, the goofballs, the nutcases. These guys, they don't quite know what what they are. They don't quite know if they're nerds, if they're conquerors, if they're adventurers, but they're definitely weirdos. And I would say this is the biggest group of guys that I met. The weird guys. The personality is weird. Like they're sketchy. They're sketchy. You know, they may or may not be making up 80% of what they're telling you. They're goofy. You know, they're little loopy kind of guys. You know, like, yo, take it easy, bro. Easy, bro. Yeah, Genki, yo, Genki. So anyway, Genki, yo, Genki. So I was saying, weirdos. The fifth kind of guy is the psychopath and the mentally deranged and mentally ill. Now, maybe they were mentally ill before they got to Japan, these kinds of guys, but the vast majority of these guys, after a long time in Japan, something in their mind goes crazy. I lived in Japan 10 years. I can tell you 8, 9 years in, I might have become one of these psychopaths, mentally deranged guys. These are the guys who've been divorced once, twice, 3 times. These are the guys who've spent 20 years learning to speak the language so they could become Japanese, only to discover they'll never be Japanese. And now they're bitter, they're hurt, they're angry, they're depressed. They hate Japan. They hate Japanese. And they want you to hate Japan and Japanese too. No matter how long you've been there, no matter how good a time you're having, they hate Japan and they want you to hate Japan too. And they're angry. And I knew more than a handful of these guys. I could say some names in Nagoya, but I won't. These guys are best to stay away from because they can really, really rain on your parade. I had several situations out in public with, one of various psychopaths that I knew in Nagoya they would freak out when we'd go to a convenience store if the convenience store clerk couldn't speak English, or they would freak out if they'd go to a Starbucks and say hello to a Japanese woman and the Japanese woman would ignore them, or they would freak out if we'd be in a donut shop and, a table full of older Japanese women next to them would move or leave. They would freak out. These guys are nutcases, psychos, man. They're sick. Their minds, that's what I think. Their minds have become sick after having lived in a different country for so long, either doing their best to acclimate and not being accepted, or fighting acclimation and not being accepted. So now they've outcast themselves further than the Japanese would, and they're angry. They're pissed off. And they can't wait to get the hell out of Japan, but they've got nowhere to go. Stay away from these guys. The sixth kind of guy is the entrepreneur. The sixth kind of guy is the entrepreneur, which I think is another category I fell into. Entrepreneurs have arrived in Japan, been there for long enough to understand a little bit about the country, the culture, and maybe the language, and they're turning their ideas into money, or social perks or notoriety or more free time or something. Entrepreneurs. Again, like I said, I knew guys in Nagoya who owned clothing stores, restaurants, nightclubs, construction companies, schools, artists. These are the entrepreneurs in Japan. And in my opinion, the entrepreneur group is the group that you want to stay closest to in Japan. In my opinion, these are the guys who are making the best of their lives in Japan. They're not jaded. They're not angry. They're not bitter. They're also not completely new and wide-eyed, like they don't know what the hell is going on. They're also not, depressed, or sad, or beaten down. These guys are alive. They know what's going on. They know the lay of the land. They've got their finger on the pulse of the energy of the city wherever they live. These entrepreneurial guys who are in Japan, in my opinion, these are the guys that you want to get closest to, stick to, and emulate. If you meet a foreign guy, if you're lucky enough to meet a foreign guy in Japan who's got his own business, a restaurant, or a school or something, become that guy's friend. That guy can teach you a lot about Japan. Besides just the culture, this guy can teach you a lot how to keep your attitude open and succeed. The entrepreneurial guys. Number 7 are the guys who are on the run. I met a couple of guys like this too. These guys, listen, let's be honest. These guys, maybe they killed somebody in their country. Come on. Maybe they're criminals. Maybe they can't go back to their country. They got deported. I knew a handful of guys like this too. Guys who are on the run. These guys are kind of looking to scam and take without giving. They're always looking over their shoulder. They don't trust anybody. They don't trust you. Yeah. They don't trust you. They don't trust themselves. Guys who are on the run, they'll make up stories about their past, things that they, fictitiously did. Knew a handful of guys who were on the run in Japan, and these guys, also guys that you probably want to stay with. Final category of the types of guys you can make friends with in Japan. These guys are the zealots. These guys are zealots. They are rabidly pro or anti something. They could be heavy into politics. They could be staunch Republicans, and they don't want to hear a thing you have to say if you're not on their side. They could be staunchly, gay rights. They could be, staunchly anti-American or anti-whatever country it is they came from. Zealots. These guys are, just a little too heavy into whatever platform or whatever group or religious group or whatever it is that they're into. The zealots. So those are the 8 kind. Okay, one more. 9. Number 9, these guys are the invisibles. Now, there are guys in Japan who have been there for 20 years, who have become psychopaths, nutcases, lunatics. But there are also guys in Japan who have been there for 20 years who have become invisible. That is, They've got a job, a 9-to-5 job. They've got a wife. They've got a kid or a couple of kids. They've got a house, a car, bills, and that's it. You don't hear from them. You don't see them out anywhere. They're not making waves. They're not holding parties. They're not angry. They're just there, man. They're just there. These guys are the invisibles. So I'm going to go over my list of the 9 types of guys that I think you'll probably run across in Japan one more time. And of these guys, this is the group of guys that you're going to be forced to make friends with. The thing is, in America, or whatever country you're from, there's such a huge pool of people from which to choose your friends. You don't have to be friends with anybody in your native country. You can choose who you want to be friends with. Well, in the same way that you can't choose your family, in Japan, it's difficult to choose your foreign friends because there are so few of you that you all wind up kind of in the same group and move in the same circles, go to the same places, know the same people, just because there are so few of you. So it's harder to choose your friends because if you start scratching people off your potential friends list, you might wind up with one person on your list in Japan who isn't Japanese, and that might be fine for you. But yeah, you're going to be forced to be friends. You're going to wind up with friends that in your own country you would never give the time of day to. Once again, the 9 types of guys that you're going to meet in Japan if you go to Japan. Number 1 is the adventurer. Number 2 is the conqueror. Number 3 is the nerd. Number 4 are the weirdos, goofballs, and nutcases. Number 5 are the psychopaths. Number 6, the entrepreneurs. Number 7, the on-the-run guys. Number 8, the zealots. And number 9, the invisibles. So that's it. That's it. My name, once again, is Trevor David Houchin. I am a kid from Brooklyn. I wrote this book. It's called The Eternal Outsider, 10 Years Black in Japan, a jaded memoir. See my name there? I wrote that book. It is on Amazon. It is a fantastic book. It is being made into a movie, from what I understand. It's out of my control, but let's hope it happens. Check out my book if you want. Like, subscribe, and share the video. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. See you guys next time. Matane.